Okay, friends, so today we're going to talk about two things that will help make your drawings more accurate. The first is proportion, and proportion is the size of one thing in relation to another. So if you look at the proportion right here, we know that a baseball is much smaller than a basketball, so these are not proportionally accurate. In this photograph, they are proportionally accurate. So proportion is just when you compare sizes. So, for example, here's our flamingo that we were drawing in the last video when we were looking for shapes. So I drew this one completely out of proportion because if you look at our reference photo, the body is this size, the head is much smaller. And if you look at my drawing, the head and the body are almost the same. Now, you can fool around with proportion to make your drawing, you know, humorous or fun. And I do enjoy doing that. I think that this drawing could be really fun, but it's not in proportion, and we are trying to make our drawings be in proportion. So once you're finished drawing your whatever you decide to draw in proportion, if you want, you can redraw it and fool with the proportions and you know, have some fun with it. Okay, the second thing that we're going to talk about is angles, the angles of your shapes. So for example, this body is angled in this direction. This neck is angled in this direction. It's not straight up and down, okay? The leg is angled in this direction. It's not straight up and down. So when we're drawing, we have to pay attention to the angles of the lines. So I'm going to talk to you about how to do that also. So we're going to talk about proportion and angle lines. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it, and you kind of have to experiment to see which works best for you. Some people like to use a skewer to measure the angles and the sizes. Some people like to use their pencil to measure the angles and the sizes. I'm going to kind of show you a little bit of a combination of both, and then you can decide what you're most comfortable with. So we're going to go back to the same reference drawing, and remember we talked about breaking it up into shapes. So I'm going to use this first shape. I'm going to draw this biggest shape first. And the first thing I'm going to do is measure the angle, and I'm actually just going to use my pencil for this. So I can see that the angle goes in that direction, so I'm just going to transfer that over to my sketchbook and draw a line like that. And I'm going to check it and make sure that I got that accurate, because sometimes I don't. Okay, so and now I'm looking at the rest of the body, and I need to figure out how wide I want to make this. You can make your drawing the exact same size as your reference, or you can make it a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. That is up to you. If you're going to make it the exact same size, then you can just use your pencil to measure, okay, I know that my line, this shape is going to be exactly this long. But the other thing you can do is you can just think about drawing your oval. So I'm going to just draw my oval. And then I'm going to need to see, to make it proportionally correct, how tall it needs to be. And the way I'm going to do that is I think I'll use my skewer for this. So I'm measuring how long the body is. And now I'm going to turn my skewer and I'm going to compare how long it is with how tall it is, right? So this measurement shows how long it is. And now I'm holding my skewer here, and if I look at it, it looks like it's almost half as wide as it is tall. Okay, understand that? Okay, so what I did was I just measured how long that oval is, then I turned it so I could see this is how long it is, and if I measure how tall it is, it ends right about there. So it's a little bit more than halfway as long. Okay, so if I go with this one, and let's say this is going to be the shape that I use. Let's say I'm just going to use that. Okay, so if I measure this, it's longer, so my flamingo is going to turn out a little bit bigger than my reference photo. I need to make sure that this part is a little bit more than halfway down, so about here. So it's actually okay. Now, of course, this isn't going to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. This is just as close as we can get, and that's okay. All right, so now let's talk about, well, I want to draw this shape in now. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that shape in. And then we need to think about the neck. So we're going to think about what angle the neck is at. Okay, remember we said it's not up and down, it's angled this direction a little bit. So I'm going to come over here, and that's the angle that I need to use to make this shape, right? So remember we talked about how that was a rectangle. Okay, so now I need to think about, okay, well, how long does that rectangle need to be? Well, I'm going to compare it to the body. The body is this long, and from the bottom of that shape to the top of the head, it's almost the same. It's a little bit shorter. So I'm going to go over here, measure how long my body is, and I know that it's just going to be a little bit shorter. So let's see. Let me show you what I did again. I measured how long the body is. That's how long it is. Now I'm going to the bottom of this shape right here, and I'm measuring to the top of the head. And I can see that the length of this body, let me rephrase that the length of this neck is a little bit shorter than the length of this body because there's a little bit of extra sticking up there. Okay, so let's measure this one because mine is not exactly the same. I go up here, and that's where it's going to end. So I know that I've already checked for the angle, and that's where the size is going to be. And this head is going to be overlapping. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that. That looks really small compared to the body, so I'm going to double check that. Here's my body, and now I'm going to look at the head. So the head is about, let's see, it's about 1/4 of the size of the body. So here's my body. 1/4 of the size of my body would probably be right about here. So, yep, my head needs to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just make that a little bit bigger. Now, this is when you want to be making all these changes. You don't want to draw your head and have all of your details in there and then come to find out, wow, it's way too small or it's way too big, because then you'll have to erase all of your hard work. Right now, we've only put about 5 minutes into our drawing, so if we have to erase something, not a big deal, okay? Okay, so I'm going to draw this little shape in, and you can measure all of these shapes if you want. And now let's look at the tail. Now I'm already looking at, well, I'm going to save some of these mistakes. There are some mistakes in here, and we're gonna address these mistakes in the next video that we have. I'm looking at this line right here and where this beak is right here, and I can see that this beak is way too big. But we'll talk about that in the next video. Right now we're just going to get our angles and our shapes. Okay. So now let's talk about the tail. So my tail, I'm going to go back to my original measurement of the body, and, oh, well, first I better do the angle, right? So our tail is going to go like this. Okay, you can see that the angle of the tail is down this direction. So I'll lift my skewer up and just draw a line so I know my tail needs to go like that. So now I need to measure how big my tail is going to be. So I'm going to measure my body, move my skewer, and my tail is about half as long as my body. So I'm going to go over here. There's how long my body is, and the halfway point's right about, let's see, the halfway point's probably right about here. So that's how long my tail needs to be. And so now I can draw my triangle, okay? Okay. All right, so now let's go down to the legs. This is a really good example of how to use your skewer to get the angles, because you can see that the legs are not straight up and down like this. They are definitely at an angle. So let's go back and see how long they need to be by measuring our body. And let's start with the back leg. So the back leg is about, let's see, it's going to be here. So it's a little less than half as long as the body. Okay. Oh, I forgot to do my angle though. So let's do our angle first. Okay, so I'm going to bring my skewer. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. Take my pencil, bring it over. I'm going to double check, bring it over. Okay. And I know that now that's my angle that I want. Now I'm doing my measuring. Measure the body. Measure the leg. The leg is a little less than half as long as the body. So I'm going to measure my body, and the leg's a little bit less than half. So if I was putting this here, a little less than half would probably be about right here. So that's where my first leg goes. Now I'm looking at that and something doesn't quite look right. I don't know why, but okay, let's keep going. I remeasured and it looks okay. All right, so now I'm making this little part, and now we're going to make the bottom of the leg. So I'm going to go, oh, let me do my angle first. That is almost straight up and down. So almost straight up and down. Let's compare the body. There's my body. And this bottom leg is more than halfway, a little bit more than halfway. So I'm going to compare my body. And a little bit more than halfway would probably be right about there. So that's where this rectangle should end. And now let's do the same with the front leg. So here's our angle. First I'm going to do my angle measurement. Bring it over. Double check. Bring it over. Okay. Now I'm going to do my length measurement. There's my body. Compare it to the leg. This part of the leg is less than half. So here's my body. This part of the leg is less than half, so it's probably going to be right about there. Okay, so I'll draw my rectangle there. And draw my little kneecap. And now let's take a look at this angle. This angle looks like this. So I'm going to bring it over. Draw my line there. And let's see how long that leg is in comparison to the body. So there's our body, and it's more than halfway. So let's do it with my body, and more than halfway would be right about here. Okay, so that's right there. Okay, so I'm feeling like I definitely have some problems with my proportion, so let's go back and check a couple of things before we go on to the next video. If I'm looking at the head in proportion to the body, I'm going to double check that. So I'm going to measure my body on the reference photo. It's this long, and the head is about a third as long as the body. So let's measure this body. And the head, pretty accurate. Okay, we'll call that close enough. Okay, then I made this shape here, and I think this is where we have a problem. This shape is way too big. Okay, and I'm just gonna real quickly, here's my body, here's the beak. So the beak is about a quarter as long as the body. So here's my body, and a quarter of as long as my body's only going to be right there. Yep. So glad I remeasured that. I had that beak way too long. Okay, so we've got our proportions fairly accurate. We've got our angles fairly accurate. And now we're going to talk about, in the next video, how we can use negative space. No. In the next video, we're going to talk about horizontal and vertical line comparison. Okay, so I'm going to give you a break for now. I'm going to go ahead and draw your whatever you decide to draw in your book, and we're going to come back and talk about horizontal and vertical line comparison. All right.